Gearing up for a road trip to Hotlanta, the rich are getting richer as the Seahawks bring back a couple of their key pieces on defense. We'll be breaking it all down here on our Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined here on Blue Friday by my co-host, Nick Lee, and a special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in, whether you're in nearby Bellevue, Washington, or listening across the state borders in Sandpoint, Idaho. Thanks for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. And, of course, making the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network. The Seahawks going to get richer on defense heading into Sunday's game against the Atlanta Falcons. We'll be breaking down the return of two key veterans on that side of the football with 5 games left to play. And then we've got our weekly keys to victory. What do the Seahawks need to do to beat the Falcons on the road? Picks to click, game predictions, and much more. All coming your way courtesy of FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. Now for your lead story here on our Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks. It feels like it's been a long time since Julian Love and Jarran Reed were on the field for the Seattle Seahawks. That is finally going to change on Sunday. Both players not receiving injury designations on Friday, and Coach Mike McDonald acknowledging that both would be playing on Sunday. Now, he wasn't willing to say whether or not it was going to be on a pitch count, particularly for Julian Love, who's missed a bunch of games this year with a hamstring injury. Jarran Reed had the wrist hand surgery. That is fully repaired, healed. Bones, soft tissue, two totally different things. So Julian Love may be going to be a little more cautious, Nick, but this is about as healthy as the Seahawks have been the entire season going into Week 14. The only guys that are out this week, Riley Mills and Derek Young, who are both on the PUP and injured reserve list, and Seattle decided they weren't quite ready to bring them back this week, but those two are closing in on playing as well. So things are looking pretty darn good with 5 games left to go for this team injury-wise, and you're hoping they can avoid any more significant ones here down the stretch.
Yeah, it really does create an unintended advantage. It's the old, we don't, the trade deadline acquisition of Julian Love midseason kind of mentality. Not that the Seahawks, it feels great because it doesn't feel like finally he's back. We desperately, it's such a gaping hole back there. Not really like that at all. Compliment to guys like Tyakata and Nick Manwari and those guys who have filled in nicely. But having him back, of course, is just a testament to the depth and ability of this defense. Can only get better. If he's on a little bit of a pitch count, that's okay, especially with what the Seahawks have back there already. Jarran Reed is another one I'm pretty excited for because when this defensive line is fully healthy and how it played against the Vikings last week, and then you add Jarran Reed, boy, that is about as deep and versatile and ferocious of an interior defensive line as you will find in the NFL. So after years, Corbin, and you and I have been on various platforms, various types of podcasts together covering the Seahawks for going on 8+ years now, you and me. And most of that time was spent going, why can't we build a defensive line? And here we are in 2025. And I would argue, I don't think it's up really for debate, especially with Jarran Reed coming back. That is the clear strength of this team.
Yeah, I think this is the best position group for the Seahawks when they have everybody on deck. Although I think the safety group might have something to say about that with the way that guys like Tyakata and Nick Manwari and DeAnthony Bell, how they have played when they have been called upon with the injuries the Seahawks have dealt with. And look, we've gotten a few questions in our mailbag about this in recent weeks, like just how much has Julian Love even missed at this point? And I find that to be laughable, and that's not, not taking shots at Tyakata. Everybody knows that I'm pretty much the president of the Tyakata fan club at this point. I have been backing him. I thought he played well early in the year when he was still getting a lot of scrutiny from fans. And now it seems like the fan base has kind of changed to the other side of the equation, and they should. I mean, Okada has made a lot of big plays. However, Julian Love just adds elements that Ty Okada is not going to bring to the mix. He's a little bigger player. He has more positional versatility. He's played outside corner in the past. You can put him into the slot. And when Julian Love is healthy, he's just a better player, obviously. He's a Pro Bowl caliber talent, a guy that will rack up interceptions. He can force fumbles. He can sack guys. He can blitz him. This is what Seattle has been waiting for, is the opportunity. And Ty Okada has made it that they haven't had to rush. They could afford to put him on injured reserve and let him fully heal. But now that you get Julian Love back, it takes your upside and your talent level to a whole other spot with him back in the lineup. And you just look at the 3 games that he's played in, Nick, stat-wise. I mean, this is just 3 games, 18 tackles, 2 pass breakups, and a sack. It's not like he was playing bad football or he was underwhelming before he got hurt. He was playing really good football the first few weeks. And then this nagging injury, had a setback during the bye week while he was training. Seattle thought they were going to have him back coming out of that bye. Ended up missing 4 more games. They're going to be fired up to have him back in the secondary. And I think you look at the defensive line. Jarran Reed has 1.5 sacks. And so some are going to say, well, where are the impact plays? If you watch the film, though, Jarran Reed creates so many opportunities for guys around him. And he is he's been a guy that gets sacks in bunches. If he gets a couple of them real quick, he can get on a roll. And he had 11.5 sacks the last 2 years. So all it would take is Jarran Reed being fully healthy, that hand being healed up, him coming back. With the way the rest of that line is rushing right now, there may be some prime opportunities where a guy like Kirk Cousins walks right up into the pocket and, here comes number 90, and he could get 2 or 3 sacks in the last 5 games. He's that kind of player that could be kind of streaky with sacks.
And I was looking at Julian Love's Pro Football Focus page as well, and he already has 3 pressures in 6 pass rushing snaps, which that's if you extrapolate that over a lot of pass rushing snaps, that's a pretty good average. Obviously, that's not going to be maintained, but still, you could see how Mike McDonald was using him kind of all over the field. Is very versatile. Yep. And Jarran Reed, like you saw those stats up there, and also just like a per snap, per pass rushing snap basis was fairly productive, even if just with the 1.5 sacks. And like you said, just with it's kind of like how you get you have several Pro Bowl receivers all of a sudden on your offense, and you're like, okay, who do you cover? Who do you go one-on-one? I was watching a really great breakdown on YouTube about how the Vikings just had no choice but to leave one of these guys one-on-one, and which is not an ideal situation for any offensive line. And it ended poorly, of course, for the Vikings. So with how and the breadth of this defensive line now, you're creating mismatches all over the place. Yeah, if they focus on Jarran Reed or he's sucking up a block, maybe he's not making the tackle, but all of a sudden, Big Cat's got one-on-one, or Byron Murphy's got, or even 2-on-1 sometimes doesn't work with Big Cat. And you just like some of those matchups. And so, Mike McDonald, of course, is going to have an absolute field day with playing with matchups along the Falcons offensive line with the pretty much full arsenal of his defensive line back.
Yeah, he's going to have that full rotation. And look, this group, Brandon Peely and Mike Morris have been playing really good football when they've had more snaps. And now those guys, you're going to have more confidence to rotate them in. Like, you don't have to have Leonard Williams or Jarran Reed playing 70% of the snaps. You can mix and match some guys. And so I think that this is a situation where sometimes when you have a guy out for a little bit and it forces some other players to step up and get more experience, it makes your football team better once you have all hands on deck again. So I think the Seahawks are going to be hoping for that both up front and in the secondary. Because, look, Julian Love, I don't care what Mike McDonald said. They said they have a plan. I think their plan is to play him probably 60-70% of the snaps. I expect Ty Okada is still going to play a fair amount in this game, and that's okay. Ty Okada has earned that right with the way that he's played, and it's a good way to get the feet back underneath Julian Love so that when you play the Colts and Rams coming up in a 5-day span, that you are at full strength and he's no longer shaking off rust. He is ready to roll and he's playing at top level. So that's kind of what – I don't want to say it's a training wheel game because that would be a disrespect to the Atlanta Falcons, but that's kind of how this is going to function, where you're just trying to get his feet back underneath him. And so we'll see how it plays out, but exciting news for the number 3 ranked scoring defense in the NFL, getting even better here for the closing stretch run. When we come back, we've got keys to victory coming your way. Seahawks at Falcons. How does Seattle get the win in Hotlanta? We're going to be breaking it all down coming up next year on our Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks. NFL Sundays move fast. One big play and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it real time. And with FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds, every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift, like when a receiver like Jackson Smith-Njigba gets super hot, or a defense tightens up, or the momentum flips after a game-changing turnover. FanDuel lets you jump into the moment with live spreads and money lines that adjust instantly, player props that update as guys like Smith-Njigba heat up, and you can bet on the next touchdown score, drive results, totals, and much more. It keeps you locked into every single snap, every drive, every possibility. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. The holidays are here, and this year, I'm not stressing out about what to wear because I'm going to be wearing my Doers, the most comfortable pants, clothing that I own, and they make me look good. Doers denim and lifestyle apparel is engineered for movement and versatility, whether I'm on the go, traveling to cover a game, lounging at home, or going to a nice dinner party. If you don't have your own Doers, now is the time. I'm recommending Doer to all of my friends. They are my favorite jeans to wear for any occasion. I'll wear them when I'm chilling at home, getting ready for a podcast, going out to eat with the wife. They keep me warm, but they don't overheat with the Cool Max fabrics. And the fabric is so stretchy, it really doesn't feel like I'm wearing jeans. It's time for you to experience the comfort of Doer. I know you'll love them. Pick a pair for yourself or as an amazing holiday gift. Find Doer at your local Seattle REI location or shop online at shopdoer.com/LockedOnSeattle. You'll get 15% off your first order. That's shopdoer.com/LockedOnSeattle for 15% off. Welcome back to the Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. He's Nick Lee. A special thanks to all the 12s listening to this Blue Friday edition here in Week 14. We greatly appreciate your support of the podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. The Seahawks hitting the road to face the Atlanta Falcons. It's the first time they'll be on the road for a while. They have 2 home games coming up against the Colts and Rams in a 5-day span. Crucial games coming up. But you can't be looking with tunnel vision towards those games. This is still a big game coming up in Atlanta. Because of how tight the NFC West and NFC standings are, there's not room for error right now for the Seattle Seahawks. And so they need to get it done in Atlanta against a team that is going to be missing some key players. Drake London has been ruled out. The number 1 receiver will not be playing for Atlanta in this game. And Brandon Dorlus, who leads the team in sacks, the rookie out of Oregon, he is out for this game as well. So that is a significant loss on defense for Atlanta. Let's get to our keys to victory for the Seahawks. And I don't know if you were referencing SpongeBob or what you were referencing when we were looking at keys to victory beforehand here, but I know that you had a very interesting way to break down what Seattle's got to do in pass protection this week after what we saw, at least in the first half, against Minnesota a week ago.
Well, sure, we can go to the chum bucket, I guess. But I used to be a shark nerd when I was a kid. I like Shark Week. You know, you can't let the chum in the water for a shiver of Mako sharks. A shiver, which is a group of sharks, by the way, fun fact. You can't let a shiver of Mako sharks dressed in Atlanta Falcons gear get to your quarterback and just the pass rush. Because really, which is weird to say, you were talking with Aaron Freeman on Locked On Falcons on the crossover about how this is a very abnormal thing to say about the Falcons. Their pass rush is nasty. And James Pierce leads the team in pressures. You mentioned Dorlus leads them in sacks. He's out. James Pierce also questionable, by the way. And I swear Leonard Floyd plays the Seahawks like 3 times a year. It just feels that way.
Feels like he's always on it like 4 teams that play the Seahawks. And I know that's not what it feels like, but
he's just a Seahawk killer. So don't have it be like last week. Yes, the Seahawks won 26-0 against the Vikings. It should have been 40-0. It should have been like the pass rush for the Vikings, the blitzing, the pressure just was too much for this offense. And that is concerning to me, especially with, I kind of view the Falcons as a little bit like the Vikings with a little bit of a better offense, but like a fierce defense, aggressive defense. You can't, once they get the chum in the water and some pressure on Darnold, things kind of snowball in the shark feeding frenzy. You don't want that. So that, and then also on top of that, that will lead to more manageable third downs if you avoid that. I was looking at their average third down distance right now is 3rd and 6.79. So almost 3rd and 7 is their average third down distance right now. And they had 7 plays against the Vikings of at least 3rd and 7 or worse. You can't do that against a pass rush like the Falcons, especially when they can respond on offense like the Vikings couldn't. So you can't give them all these opportunities that the Seahawks gave the Vikings because their offense was stuck stuck in the chum, I guess. You can't let that happen. Raheem Morris will get in his bag on aggressiveness, and you got to stay ahead of the chains on third. You don't need to be 3rd and 3, 3rd and 2, but at least 3rd and 5 or better consistently. And also we talk about the play action, how that's kind of gone by the wayside. And Rashid Shaheed, not that I'm saying he's going to bust as a trade guy, but man, it just seems like they can't quite get the traction with him as a main part of this offense. That seems a little forced. This would be a nice game for Shaheed to have a big moment, a big deep play downfield.
Yeah, and going off what he said about the 3rd and long situations, I feel like this has been a bigger problem for the Seahawks the last 3 or 4 games. And I don't know if that's just because of the type of opponents that they're playing, and some of these teams have figured out some things to get the offensive line in a little bit of a pickle with the way that they're blitzing or not blitzing, the sim pressures, the disguising. It's been tough sledding at times for the offensive line, but it seems like that has been the biggest problem as they've gotten into, early this season, the first half of the year, they weren't even getting to third down a lot of times because they were so prolific on 1st and 2nd down, getting big plays. That has disappeared quite a bit these last few weeks. So I'm not saying they need to get back completely to that point where it's like, well, we're going to 60 yards to JSN here. And it'd be nice if they do that this weekend, but they've got to have more efficient plays on 1st and 2nd down. And you could say this for any game, any opponent that they're playing, but particularly one like the Falcons that does have 41 sacks this year. They're the only team in the NFC that's got more sacks than the Seahawks. They blitz a lot. They will send guys from all over the place. They do it differently than what Minnesota does. I think there's more of an intentionality to what they show. Brian Flores it's so sporadic. I think the Falcons are a little more structured in the way they do things, but they're still extremely effective doing that. So you have got to limit the opportunities for them to really be able to pin their ears back and get exotic with their blitz packages with 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8 or longer. You can't have very many of those in this football game. And as for the play action, I want to see the play action, but I want to see Seattle set it up because this is another game. Atlanta's linebackers, Caden Ellis, Divine Diablo, still the best name in the NFL, in my opinion. Those 2 guys are more blitzing and coverage correlated linebackers. They are not physically built to handle a punishing, bruising run game. And look, zone run game does not mean that it's passive at all. I think a lot of people make that misconception. Really good zone teams play with physicality too. Seattle needs to do that. They were able to do that in the second half last week against Minnesota, and they started to really wear that defense down, and it took some of that pass rush and blitzing ability away. I think they got to do that from the outset in this game. I think you attack Atlanta in the middle, and I think this is a team that is absolutely ripe to be ran on right now. And I think that opens up your Sam Darnold shot plays, get JSN in one-on-one situation, Rashid Shaheed against a team that he has killed in the past when he's with the New Orleans Saints. He's had some big games with New Orleans against Atlanta. So to me, you set up the play action with the way that run game functions early and really attacking. I know you're a wide zone team, but I think attacking between the tackles in this game, that's how I'm attacking the Atlanta Falcons primarily with my run game. As for the defensive side of the football, it's a little different assignment than what it would have been if Michael Penix was healthy for the Atlanta Falcons. Kirk Cousins never has been a beacon of mobility, especially at this stage of his career. He's been relegated to statue status for the most part, but He's still a guy that can throw the football well, and he makes smart decisions. He gets rid of the football quickly. So that can put some pressure on an opposing defense, even if the Falcons are going to be shorthanded without Drake London, and they're missing a few other pieces as well in this football game.
Absolutely. And if Gibbs and Montgomery for Detroit are Sonic and Knuckles, I don't know what Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier would be, maybe Mario and Bowser. I'm not quite sure, but they're a solid pair. Of course, Tyler Algier, shout out to my guy, single season rushing record holder for BYU. Watched him play a lot, and he kind of brings that same – and I'll forgive me for the BYU tangent for a second, but he was the closer at BYU where they have a lead and he would just grind you down and just, he invited the physicality. And then of course you have Bijan Robinson, who's, the do everything back. So that's a dangerous combo if you let them get going, because especially, God forbid, they get a lead, they can lean on those guys and that game will end real quick. And they have a top 10 rushing attack. So letting the ground game get going is a recipe for keeping this team in the game, or worse, playing keep away with the Seahawks offense. So you can't let those two go. You got to swarm. It's not just going to be one guy, especially with Algier. I mean, they're both tough to tackle in different ways. So either way, you got to swarm. You got to play solid defense and tackle. And then Kyle Pitt, eternal, maybe it'll be this year in fantasy kind of tight ends, but 3 of the last 4 games though, he's had at least 11 plus yards per catch and somehow only has 1 touchdown. But the Seahawks are 30th right now in yards allowed to tight ends. And so this is a Nick Manwari, Ernest Jones, and company and those guys at Julian Love, perhaps, with Kyle Pitts, 5 or fewer receptions, keep him under 10 yards a catch. He's going to get his, especially with Cousins, probably relying on him, especially without Drake London, like you said. Kyle Pitts is going to be a feature in some way. So they're probably going to force feed him a little bit. But not letting him and Cousins get, take over and get comfortable. And with Cousins too, that part of that is the interior pass rush. A little bit on that later for me, but I think straight up, Corbin, if you were just power ranking Super Bowl contenders based on the defensive front, the Seahawks are number 1. They're number 1. They are the number 1 interior defensive line, in my opinion, in the entire NFL. And they need to make the Atlanta Falcons and Kirk Cousins feel that.
Yeah, you're 100% correct on that. And we talked about this a little bit earlier this week with some of the key matchups, and now looking at it from more of a big picture view here, Kyle Pitts is going to be the primary weapon. I mean, Darnell Mooney is a guy that is capable of making some big plays happen, but he's had kind of a down year for Atlanta in his second season with the Falcons. Pitts has really been their go-to guy. He's on pace for almost 80 receptions this year. Now, he's only got 1 touchdown. I'm not blaming him for that. I feel like this offense, they've been one of the weaker red zone teams in the NFL. They've had a hard time finishing drives, the quarterback injury and the offensive line issues. But to me, that is the thing here that you got to get done. You got to find a way to limit Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier in terms of yards after contact and yards after the catch. You got to limit them. They're going to make some catches. They're going to run the football, and they're going to have some decent carries, but you can't let them bust one. And so I think that's where that swarm tackling mentality is. And you got to find a way to try to limit Kyle Pitts from having a few chunk plays in the passing game. And if he does, look, you got to find a way to hold firm and keep him out of the end zone, but you can't let him have a few explosives because that opens things up for the pass or for the rushing game for Atlanta. And with that interior defensive line, Atlanta lost Drew Dahlman this offseason. They let him go to the Chicago Bears. The Bears have benefited immensely from that. It has been a struggle for the Falcons trying to offset his departure because they have a totally different center in there. And Ryan Newsel has struggled quite a bit. And then at one of the guard spots, they have former Syracuse player Matthew Bergeron, who was a tackle in college. His play has been very up and down. And Chris Lindstrom, who's been a Pro Bowler, he's probably their best lineman when he's right, but he's been playing at far below 100%. He has not been healthy this year, so he's been more vulnerable than normal. I just look at Leonard Williams, Jarran Reed coming back, Byron Murphy, Mike Morris, Brandon Peely's playing good football. I don't know how the Atlanta Falcons contain that group. If Seattle does what they should do there, and again, no mobility at this point for Kirk Cousins, got a couple sacks and a strip sack on him last year, I think you can inflict some significant damage on him in the pocket with that group by themselves.
100%. And this is one of those games where you got to earn the right to rush the passer. And that is back to number one with the run game with Algier and Bijan Robinson. If you let them win on first and second down, you don't get to rush the passer on 3rd and 2. They're going to keep running it. And so this is a game where you got to win on first and second down. This is totally cliche, but it's very true in this sense, because if it's 3rd and 4 plus with what the Seahawks have on the line, it is absolutely advantage Seahawks. And it can snowball. You talked about this with Aaron on Locked On Falcons. This is a game where a thing like that with Cousins being a statue back there, the D-line, that can talk about chum in the water. That can snowball real quick.
Yeah, this could be one of those classic avalanche games if the Seahawks are able to take advantage of some of the big matchup advantages that they have going into this one. When we come back, we've got picks to click, we've got game predictions, and much more. That'll be coming your way here on our Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Welcome back to the Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. He's Nick Lee. A special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in. And thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate your support of the podcast and helping Locked On Podcast Network become the #1 sports podcast network. The Seahawks looking for win number 10, a chance to match their season total from last year. They've got 5 games left to play, battling the Atlanta Falcons on the road. And it's a Falcons team that is in desperation mode, 4-8, probably on the outside looking into this point. I mean, if they win out and get to 9-8, maybe they can climb to the top of this division, because it's not the strongest division by any means, but they're near the bottom of the NFC. It's been a difficult season. Seahawks are looking to keep that going on Sunday in Atlanta. Let's get to our picks to click. And I'll admit, last week was one of the worst ones I've had all year in terms of my picks not getting it done. I had a hot streak going really since about week 5. I had at least one guy that I hit on every week. Last week was the exception to that rule. So looking to bounce back. Let's start on the offensive side of the football against this Falcons defense. Who is your pick to click, Nick?
Well, I'm going to go with the top targeted receiver from last week, which is kind of crazy to say. Tight end, A.J. Barner. Yes, he was the top targeted pass catcher last week for the Seahawks. And in fact, since week 10, he's been targeted, I believe, the 12th most times among tight ends in the NFL, more than guys like Tyler Warren and T.J. Hawkinson. He's starting to gain more and more targets. And in a game against against the Vikings, where things were breaking down real quick for Sam Darnold, things were speeding up real quick on him. A.J. Barner turned into something of a security blanket a little bit, at least near the line of scrimmage. And not that I think that's going to exactly happen this time, but I do see A.J. Barner making a couple catches. I'm going to give him, 4 catches for 60 yards and a touchdown here. I think that he's going to be a nice contributor in this game too. He's not going to nuts, but a couple first downs and a touchdown for A.J. Barner, another security blanket type game here with a fierce pass rush for Atlanta, but Barner will be there.
Yeah, you know what? I considered Barner for a lot of the same reasons that you mentioned, because if Atlanta does get some quick pressures the way that they're hoping to, that might be the outlet that we're going to see Sam Darnold turn to. But I'm going to go to a guy that the last 2 times I picked him, he's gotten a touchdown. So I'm going to hope to keep my streak going here. And look, I mentioned it on Monday and Tuesday's show. I think we are seeing Ken Walker III play some of his very best football here the last month. And I know it hasn't turned into 100-plus yard rushing performances or anything like that. Some of that's been because Charbonnet is running well too, and they really have that thunder and lightning package going. But I feel like we are finally in year 4. We're finally seeing Ken Walker III take what is there for him most of the time, instead of trying to be Houdini and getting himself into a pickle. Not near as many negative runs as a result. He's getting downhill. He's running with authority. He's bowling over guys at the end. Like, this looks like a dog that has gone from pup to true canine now at this point. And I just think this Atlanta defense, they're going to be missing Brandon Dorlus in the middle. They already have some major issues depth-wise there. Their linebackers are not great against the run. I think K9, he almost busted one last week. I think he has a 50-yard rushing touchdown in this game. I think Atlanta is going to have the Moses parting the seas thing go on, and K9 is going to run past everybody and just score. I'm going to have him go over 100 in this game for rushing yards. I think that Atlanta is ripe for that, and then that opens up the play action. So I'm going with K9 having a fantastic game in Atlanta. Let's go to our defensive picks to click now. And this one was actually one that I had to think about a little bit because there were a few different candidates that made some sense for me.
Well, a quote seen from Bull Durham, Jarran Reed wants to bring the heater to announce his presence with authority. And I think he's going to do that. That hopefully that goes better than that scene with.
I was just going to say, I hope it goes better than the movie.
The quote still stands, even though that didn't work out for him. But I think he's going to try to announce his presence with authority. Hey, I'm back, and I'm going to go. He gets a sack. I think he gets another big tackle for loss. But this is another game with, like we said, Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier. They're going to really try to run the ball. That's like their only hope. Jarran Reed will certainly have a thing or two to say about that. So give me a sack and a big tackle for loss in a big spot where they think they can run the ball for a first down, but they don't because of Jarran Reed.
Yeah, it's funny. I actually thought about a game the Seahawks played in a few weeks ago when I came up with my pick here because Cameron Kinchens, he did it to Geno Smith last year, but he has been utterly dominant against Sam Darnold. 3 interceptions in his career against him. Kobe Bryant has done the same thing to Kirk Cousins in the past, including last year having a pick against him. And sometimes quarterbacks, there's just certain players that are a kryptonite for them. Peyton Manning, there were a couple of guys in the New England Patriots. I know that he absolutely despised Lawyer Malloy. That was a guy that absolutely killed him early in his career. Every QB's got that guy. Kobe Bryant has kind of become that Seahawks version here against Kirk Cousins, who is a cerebral quarterback, but if he has the ball slip away from him just a hair, Kobe Bryant always seems to be in the right place at the right time. I think Bryant gets a pick for a second straight time against Kirk Cousins. I think he gets an interception in this game. And I'm also going to give him half a sack because I think Seattle is going to mix and match some blitzes with their safeties. And I expect Kobe Bryant is going to get one of those rare opportunities in this game against Atlanta's offensive line. So give me a partial sack and an interception for Kobe Bryant, who historically has played some of his very best football when Kirk Cousins is the quarterback on the other side. All right, let's get to our game predictions now. And I mentioned this in Thursday's crossover. There's something about this game that at least on Thursday that I was thinking, for some reason, I can't pull the trigger quite yet in the Seahawks getting the spread. I don't feel that way now. I'll explain why in a second, but I'm curious your thoughts on this.
Spoiler, I do. However, they do deserve respect. They beat the Bills. They only lost to the Patriots by 1 in Foxborough. They were feisty earlier in the year, and that can crop up again. I do see this as kind of like a brick by brick kind of game for the Seahawks, or maybe, gingerbread house December, a gumdrop by gumdrop, a little frosting here, a little frosting there, kind of putting it a little bit together. It's not going to be this huge masterpiece immediately. Kind of like how I do see this breaking a little bit like the Vikings game, hopefully with a little less offensive struggles. But the Falcons have a great defense, great pass rush. The offense is better than the Vikings, I think, at least with Max Brosmer under center versus Kirk Cousins. And so this is going to be a game where it's not going to be this huge, breakout play or anything. It's just going to be brick by brick, and it's going to turn into a 27-13 Seahawks win eventually, with just wearing them down with depth and health and just overall talent.
I'm going 34-13. And the reason that I've changed my tune here, and look, I think Atlanta's got some really good players. I think Bijan Robinson is an absolute stud. But this is a Seattle Seahawks defense that when they are able to really zero in on the run, good luck. That has been the way that it is. And I just think if Drake London was out there, I don't know that he makes up a 20-something point difference, but Drake London opens this offense up quite a bit. They don't have a true number one right now, and you can maybe argue a true number two because Mooney's really, to me, Mooney's a really good 3 that can be a 2. They have some issues at receiver. They have offensive line issues. There's injuries. They have guys in the middle. I don't know. I just think Seattle has such a big advantage there. Defensive line against that interior for the Falcons. And I think they are going to be able to do what makes Kirk Cousins melt down. And that is get interior pressure quick. I think the Seahawks are going to deliver that early and often. And last year's game kind of was one of those where it was close in the first half and then it got away from Atlanta. I can see this game playing out very similar where the Falcons throw some punches early and then the Seahawks just start delivering haymakers in the second half. And I think they're going to get a couple turnovers on defense. I mentioned the Kobe Bryant interception. I think there will be a strip sack in this game as well. I just think Seattle's defense is going to be too much for the Atlanta offense. And Seattle likes playing on the road. They really do. And I think they're going to be looking like this is not a game to take an opponent lightly, and I don't think they will. They know what's at stake here. They're trying to get that number 1 seed. I think the Seahawks are going to show up, and they are going to deliver in this one. So, yeah, I'm going 34-13. I think Seattle wins this one going home, and they're going to be partying on the plane back to SeaTac. I think that's the way things are going to play out. As always, you can follow me at X and Blue Sky, Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Nick at NickLee51. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. Coming up on Sunday, we'll have a Seahawks squad show right after the game. Robert Turbin, Anders Hurst, Rob Rang, and then I will be live from the stadium a couple hours after the final whistle with my weekly post-game show. It will happen this week, folks. I'm not going to be skipping the game and staying home. My house is on the market, so I don't have as much work to do. I'll be there in Atlanta. Make sure that you're listening in to both of those shows. Enjoy your weekend. Enjoy the game. Go Hawks.